We are up to Daf Chof Tes Amid Aleph, and we're talking about how a sukkah should be your new home. However, if it's uncomfortable, if it rains, you are potter. You are potter. While it rains, because Hamitztayer is potter and a sukkah. And interesting in Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Tefillin, when he talks about when do we say kol hapotem and adover v'sei nikra hedget. If you do something, you don't have to hold a hedget. When do we say kol machmet tavel abracha? And he talks there about etching lines in your mezuzah or whatever it is to film to make a straight lines. He says where it's enhanced the mitzvah than tavel abracha. But where, for example, instead of it rains in the sukkah, you still sit in the sukkah, then there you're a hedget. Interesting, yet we all sit in the sukkah while it rains. The Einig Yom Tov has the famous shikta, which I never understood, that sitting in a sukkah while it rains, you're actually doing an avera, because since we learned of tests that the sukkah is holy, so it's like a carbon, it's also bahana. So while you're doing a mitzvah, you're allowed to be that. But when you're not doing a mitzvah, you're having hana for something which is also bahana, which is baffling. The only reason why you potter is because it's mistay. You have no hana, exactly. So what's the also bahana? You're not having any hana whatsoever. And anyway, others say this. Vasemba says that if you have more tsar from not being able to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah than the tsar of being in the sukkah, then the chayiv. Exactly. And I told you yesterday about the Rambam that it's only the first night if it rains, and only according to some, if it was sunny, then suddenly it started raining. Others say it only applies to Yisrael and not to Chutz La'aretz. And so let's see the Gemara further. We'll come back to this discussion. It says the Gemara, over 3 lines on the top. Rava says, Ma'ani Mishnaya, when it comes to glasses that you use for drinking, Bimmet Talalto, you can leave them in a sukkah. Ma'ani Michla, when it comes to plates, food, thing that you need to eat, Bar Talalto, outside the sukkah. Most Mephoshim say it's talking about after you're finished eating. Can you still leave them there? The glasses you can still leave there, but dirty dishes, you should take them out. They don't look very, very nice. Okay, chatzla, if you have an earthen jug that you draw water with, or a wooden jug, or a wooden pail, bar mitzvah, they're not very pretty, they don't enhance the sukkah. Remember, sukkah is a mitzvah. And we said before, you bring a kelim noyim, matzoyis noyim, only nice stuff. The shiraga, but a candle is, even though it's made out of clay, even though it's ugly, in Hilchos Shabbos we say, that it's booked because of the miyas, you're allowed to have it in the sukkah. Yet, but I'm the others say, bar mitzvah outside the sukkah. Well, please, not an argument. The candle is different than the other kelim, but all the other kelim talking about after you finished eating. The candle is talking about while it's burning. In a small sukkah, we're scheduled to catch fire. In a large sukkah, we're not scheduled to catch fire, so you can have the sukkah. Baruchim haboy. Says the Gemara, the 2 dots, Chof Tes Amid Aleph, Tona we learned. When it goes off, it goes foul. Or according to the Rambam, means when you have a loss, the porridge is not soup, it's not thick, it's something like in between, a thick soup, broth. Abaye, Rabbi Yossi came in. Rabbi was in Rabbi Yossi, what's the top of the page, Metal Alto, inside the sukkah, Noshav Zika, in sukkah. So yeah, shade. Remember, sukkah is called Hashem's Chach. Noshav Zika, wind came along and blew, become nice. It was a little twigs fell in, like in New York when the little green pines keep on falling into your soup. Rabbi Yossi, take out my kelim from here. But now we learn it has to be to such an extent that the food gets spoiled. The D, remember we had Arab Sachin. Even the Anina Datoy. Gemara said the 3 things that are terrible. One of them is somebody who was very, very delicate. And someone else was a captain, he has a temper. He says, I got everything. And he says over there, I know somebody had too much Rahman than everybody else.
So therefore, take the food out, or I have to leave the sukkah.
No, I'm leaving the sukkah. Yeah, I came out of it. It's just like the food got ruined already, because my everything is relative to the person. Exactly. But very interesting is, I always remember the 3 things: Rachmanin, Raschonin, and Anini Das. And Rabbi Yossi says, "Kulabi, how can you be a Rachman and a Raschen at the same time? A temper and have Rachmanis. You would think that if you have Rachmanis, over the Rahmanas, then you don't get angry. Nothing upsets you. Exactly. Yet it's possible, clear, Rabbi Yosef had both, that he can be a Raschin and a Rachman at the same time. So the same person. It's just different people, all those different people. I don't know, interesting.
Sometimes to show up.
Oh, but that's not really a Raschin. Raschin means you lose your temper quickly. You have a bad temper. A person has a calculator deliberate,
First reaction is to lose their temper. Blow up.
They have a lot of money. They give you $100. Kenzine, okay. So what we learned. And you went out. In the middle of the meal and have to go back into the sukkah when it stops raining. Finish your sukkah, and then you go into the other activities. You're sleeping under the sukkah, entering expression. The sukkah means chach. Over here, probably the side will say this sukkah, yeah. The tachlim is on the schach. The Yodah and it started to rain. The Yodah and he went down. Yeah, you don't have to go back. Remember, everything is orally. In other words, said. So Yodah can be written with an ayin till you wake up, or Yodah can be aleph till it gets light in the morning. Till you wake up. That means if you wake up 12 o'clock at midnight, you have to go back and sleep there. Or until it gets in the morning, and then we have to wake you up. Because now it's morning, you should be sleeping in the sukkah. Toshma coming here. No, Rashi's the Gemara's question. Rashi is telling you what the Gemara said. Yeah, it's a Gemara. Toshma coming here. Until there's Yoyer is actually makes a chamba when the sun begins to rise, and both be if you have to wait till sunrise. And then you will sort of wake Ella. You need two things. First, you have to wake up already, and it's already daybreak. If it's daybreak, you didn't wake up, we're not going to stir you. And if you woke up, it's not daybreak, we're not going to force you to go back to the city. The Mishnah says example that it is a servant who wants to come and mix water or drink for his master, and then he spilled out the water. Who spilled out? Says the Gemara, who spilled out the water? Tashma. What do you mean Shavcha? So Rashi here, okay, Tanya, we learned Shafach Rabbi Kitna Panav. It's the master. What happened was the servant took the water, gave it to the master. The master took water and threw it back at the servant. I can't deal with you. Rashi says, well, what's the shaila here? Who cares? Who threw the water? Who? So Rashi says, is the pshat that the person who was sitting in the sukkah didn't want to sit in the sukkah? Or the pshat that the master didn't want to sit, you should sit in the sukkah? So that the master threw the water, the master said, I don't want you in the sukkah. If you threw the water back, if you misbehaved, the problem is the yeshiva sukkah, or the problem is, Rashi goes even further. The Yeridas Kshamim is the problem, the rain itself, that's the master, or the sitting in the sukkah while it's raining, which is you. No, by you sitting in the sukkah while it's raining, you should have walked out. It's like you're throwing it back in his face. Carmen Sanel says here, what's the nafrim? So he wants to say as follows: that if the master's throwing the water at you, that means the master, I don't want you in the sukkah, then you're not allowed to be in the sukkah. If you're the one who's throwing it back to the master, then you're reforming, you're doing tshuva. You say, I want to stay in the sukkah. Then it's a good thing to stay in the sukkah. So he says, the Gemara concludes, if the master throwing the water, you're not allowed to be in the sukkah anymore. That's a common sense. Is exactly the opposite. I think it's a Sfas Emes, but I don't remember. I think maybe it's not right. But the Pshat is just the opposite. If the master's throwing the water at you, we had more of a basta of youth. When the Rameya was asked, how can you give tzedakah? He was asked, how can you give tzedakah? The guy asked, how can you give tzedakah to the Eibush that made him poor? And you give it tzedakah. He says, forget. It's the Eibush that loves that person, puts the son in jail, and he loves his son. He's very happy if you smuggled food into him. Same thing, the Eibush didn't want to make it difficult for you to sit in the sukkah, and you still persist in sitting in the sukkah. Forget, the Eibush has nachas from it. If you're the one who decides to throw the water back in his face and everything else, then you shouldn't sit in the sukkah. Anyway, talking about similar clothes, the Gemara diverges into other things. It says the Gemara, when there's an eclipse in the sun, it's a bad sign for the whole signal for the whole world. Much more than the was done king. As soon as somebody made a party for his friend, then he gave him a lantern to be able to see the food. Your son, Carson, and Anki, two positive name, get rid of the sun. But Shiva became dark. So it's a bad sign. The king's angry with everybody. Calls Machamaidus like when there's an eclipse of the moon, Simon and Rallis and Ancient Israel, it's a bad simon for the nation. Because the Eden, and this is a very interesting word here, the Eden are the ones who are more used to persecution than anybody else. Marshal is safer, Shabbat is safer. If a teacher comes to class and he has a strap, a whip in his hand, or a cane in his hand, Midoi, which kid in the class is trembling the most? So in other words, as Rashi explained it, if things happen to the entire world, then you didn't have to say the messages for them. Right now, what's happening in the pandemic. If the things are happening to the entire world, because since we suffered more than anyone else in Golis, then obviously it has something to do with us. What basis? Okay. Okay, the Rashi right here. We are the ones who are okay. Look at Rashi. The last narrow line. Call mine is very relevant today. Call mine poroni is any kind of poroni that comes to the world. Yesh lehem liyisrael lidag, the Eden should be concerned with loimbit to say loy ba simen ze ela b'shvi leinu. You don't need to protest in the Poland. Yosim misharum more than anybody else. But nation the gilis luke is yosim mekulim, because we are persecuted more than anyone else. We're always a victim. Yeah, well, but Mom is relevant today. Let's continue. Right. When there's an eclipse of the sun, is a bad sign for the goyim because they follow the sun. Levana like and the moon is attacked. So that's a bad sign for Eden. We follow the moon and they follow the sun. If the sun eclipses early morning when the sun is on the east side, then it's a bad sign for those people who live in the eastern side of the world. If it's in the late afternoon, then on the west. Them to give noon the entire world. Fun of diamond and it's a red color. You see eclipse like it's a red color. Bola elam, that means it'll be some kind of a plague. But if let's say it's dark, then that means it's famine. The famine means emaciated, drawn, and from dark. The zoo, if it's both colors, then if it was what do you call it? If it, let's say if it started right in the morning, if it's actually in the afternoon when the sun is about to set, that means the whole entire day went by normally. That means put on your shalom that whatever is supposed to happen, it will take a little bit delayed. But as soon as the sun comes out, the machar is it's coming straight away. My head is love it, coming straight away. Please look at. There isn't a nation that is destroyed that it's malach. So here it's referring to a malach. Like Rashi says, samol for Esav, that it doesn't get punished with it. It says in the passage, I will punish also and rule against all those malachim who defended them. Which man she Yisrael oisin and training shemakim ain misiyad. Do what Abisha wants them to worry about all of these signs. Remember, it says the passage koyam Hashem, but they'll go out till do not learn from the going. But oisa shemaim al teichot. Do not fear the signs in heaven. Ki yechatu hagoyim hem. It's meant for the going. So if we're oisa shemakim, we don't have to worry about it.
But that's still after
the Gemara, I do call me sorry after the goyim should be scared, not the Eden. For four things, the sun, which is the leader of everything, is afflicted. Al-Bezn Shemay, the leader, the head of the Bezn passes away. Nobody gives him the due cover, the due eulogy he deserves. Again, so the Chama, that became dark, and nobody treated him with respect. Al Naida Hamayudasa should talk to be a Naida Madasa that screamed in the city, but Amy should nobody helping against the son of the leaders. So it's the Chama. Al Mishkav Zacher and Mishkav Zacher, that even though those days that Mishkav Zacher was rife, nobody ever imagined that you'll have the right Ksuba. Like today when you get married. Which never happened before. Al Shnei Achin, two brothers, two brothers where their blood spilled out at the same. Two brothers killed Nebuchadnezzar at the same time. That's so cruel that for that the sun gives a football. And we're not exactly sure some of them what's the connection to the sun. Or bishvil arbad varam like, and before different things, the moon gets afflicted. Al kois ve plaster, and those are right for fraudulent contracts. And they make believe as if somebody else wrote it, like hacking into somebody's telephone account, maybe as if he's calling or sending emails. Those that give false testimony. All to do with the moon has to do with stealing somebody else's. No, because the moon has nothing of its own. The moon gives everything of its own legitimately. You are taking things from others illegitimately, using their name on false documents, testifying false about events, somebody else. The problem with that is we have more comedies, they go to other fields, so ganving again, taking those from them. By chopping down trees, you are denying food from other people. So therefore, all of these four things are connected to the moon. Moon has a shaykhis, a legitimate shaykhis to the sun, and here you're taking away from others. You shouldn't. Or we should. Okay. They didn't lose your mother.
You never see cowboys. It's easy to feed them if you find stubble or things.
Yeah.
We
should so the four things then the chasim of balabatim are given over to the king's treasury. Al-Mashe Shtadas Purim, and those people who hold, even though you paid my loan, I say, I don't have the contract anymore, I keep it, so one day I can reuse it again. Unfortunately, that's Mama's Geneva. So he's not going to use it again, but he can use his leverage to get another deal out of you, something. If you don't do this and this for me, I'm going to produce it. But he didn't actually steal. People lend money, but it's again, it's not Geneva because it's by consent. But nevertheless, it's wrong. And Ba'al Shahya something simply be unlimited. Like we hang our Shabbos above that by the base of there's this Canaan. Maybe she said the only thing ever have to on. First he said don't punish this Canaan by full base of then he said that should be first because they should have been Meich and they weren't Meich. If you're in the position to stop people doing things, prevent them, and you didn't, you're liable. Ba'al Shapoiskim, this is interesting. Shapoiskim's Doka Barabim. They promise to give tzedakah barabim, and they don't give. Now, we're not talking about Stam made a net and didn't give it. What's the big deal? What's the finish? What we're talking about over here is you do it for the right reason. According to some portion, I'm saying give me $1,000. There's appeal to me, make it loud. That's going to embarrass everybody else to give only $50. They're going to have to up what they're going to give. So because of what I said, I caused everyone to get more tzedakah. So you might think that's all right. I can't afford to give $1,000, but this is all right. That's still dishonest. And that's what he's talking about. Others take it literally. In fact, others say that that's not a bad thing to do.
It's not just a basically to get shoes, you shouldn't be making mistakes. People should give and let it be known that they give. So the many years of thing else, should anyone like
the mitzvah, four things. Four things about the Chassid Balabatim. Some say the Timya means that the Rashi says it means it disappears. Others say it ends up at the king's. By the king. Al koshes chazachir, those people who hold back wages. The al koshes chazachir means that you hold back, but you eventually pay. Al oishkes chazachir means you never plan to pay. You're stealing. Al shaporkin oil ma'al tavarein. They don't take responsibility for anything. They constantly pass it out to others, delegate to others. The noisach chavarein, never step up to the plate. The al gases haruach. Somebody's haughty. This is the worst trait that a person can have, to be filled with hubris. By those who are humble, it says, again, the humble people, they'll inherit the land. They'll enjoy the peace. This finishes the first half of the Sefer Sukah. This finishes all the laws to do with Sukah, and now we start with the Arba Minim. And then Sukah Shev and everything else. Says the Mishnah, if somebody stole a lulav, the hayavesh or a lulav is dry. What exactly is a dry lulav? Taste brings it means if you put your finger on it, it falls apart. Also, if it's dry, it's still alright. It has a chak. But if you put your finger and it falls apart, that's totally dry. Apostle is apostle. Why is apostle? So the big machlik is Rashi and Taste. Rashi is apostle because it says, "Was that keli man veyu?" It's a mitzvah to have hiddur mitzvah. Taste, what are you talking about? It says pre it's held by Esig, and we compare. There's a special din by Lulav and Esig. The Chayid Machlekes says according to Rashi, the idea of hidden mitzvah is not there's a mitzvah called hidden mitzvah, one mitzvah, and therefore whatever you're doing, hidden mitzvah is whatever mitzvah you're doing, it becomes part of that mitzvah. So by Esig, the mitzvah of hidden mitzvah by Esig is a mitzvah in Esig. The hidden mitzvah is a part of every single mitzvah. So therefore Rashi says here's hidden mitzvah. Taisa understood hidden mitzvah is a separate mitzvah altogether. He says no, there's an inherent mitzvah of by Esig and Lulav. Now, you have to have hidden. Shalasheda, a tree that's being worshipped. Big machlekes that had to be planted for Asheda. In fact, we call Asheda the Moshe the whole time because it's planted for Asheda, even if it wasn't worshipped, or if it's not planted Asheda, but now it's being worshipped, and so on. Vishalila the Achas also possible for a different reason, because Tusim Mechta Shiura, and that is because since this thing is you have to burn it, you'll never have the share. Why don't we say because mitzvah are available soon to talk about? Niktim Roshei, what happens the end, the top of the lulav gets cut off. Now we'll have the Gemara later, the two missing leaves are missing, then it's possible. So what's a chil niktim or maybe it's kosher. Niktim Roshei has to be stood in line. There's a machlekes what niktim Roshei is. It's talking about the head of the shedder. We're talking about the head of the tiyamis, the top. Every leaf of a lulav is tiyamis, is folded together. But when we say tiyamis by lulav, we don't actually mean that. We mean, most of us actually mean that in the lulav itself, there's two top leaves that come out of the shedder and that are very close to each other. That's a tiyamis we talk about all the time. But in a way, kikma is worse than nitli. You don't realize there's something supposed to be there. But kikma means you see the two leaves there, but it's cut off on top. So it's lacking in hadar as well. And Yifritzu Allah, according to Rashi, it's all means that all the leaves fell off completely and you hold them together. The face is then full completely, they're still attached on the bottom. But because the face says that the word for falling off altogether is a different word altogether. That's not the word. And it means that's called hutzi, but it means that it's barely attached. Possible. Yifritzu Allah, it's still strongly attached, but it opened up pretty wide. Kasha is still kasha. Because kappas means that that it could be tied together. You have to, in order to be a lulav, you have to tie it together. We talk about lulav first, even though the pasuk creates hadar first, because lulav has the mitzvahs and we make a bracha on it. So the mishnah therefore talk about the lulav. Lulav has the hadar not with it. Sine habazel, that's a lulav that where you have the branches that the way they are is that the bottom row of branches of leaves come to the bottom of the next layer. No, it's not like what we have today that the leaves go, the outer leaves go all the way to the top, and then it gets smaller, and they all end up on the top. No, we're talking about there's a special kind of species that the outer leaves come up to here, and then the inner leaves start over here and come up to here, and then inner leaves from that start over here and go up here. But they all overlap a little bit. See how about all contiguous each other, so it's kosher. Lulav sheyesh bo shloisha tvachim. The lulav has 3 tvachim, which is the length of a hodas and a rubber. Kedei lenanei boy, and it has an extra tefach. You might say later. I should say ukdei has an extra tefach that you can shake it. Kosher, then it is a kosher lulav. The minimum size of lulav is 4 tvachim. Says the Gemara, kapasig l'tani. You say clearly loishna ba yom tov rishon, loishna ba yom tov sheni. You don't make a distinction between yom tov rishon and sheni. That sounds like a mission that all of the tefillin apply to the entire yom tov sukkos. Bishlei mi yavesh hadabin. Yavish, I understand it requires the whole sukkah need hadar. The lekker and you're lacking hadar. Elo gozel. What about stealing? Bishlei mi adisha lechem. Bishlei is yours. Elo yom tov sheni am my life. Why should it be yom tov sheni? Big machlek is a sheni. What exactly yom tov sheni is? Nitfor Ramban and others. Does yom tov sheni mean literally? Yom Tov Sheni, that means that all these psulim that the Mishnah says it, they will say a borrowed lulav. It's only possible for the Yom Tov. But the second day Yom Tov, you can already have a borrow, because even though it's only meaning of saying Yedenu, we're not the Yarcha, and therefore only chumrous things we should gain or don't work and all that, but a prat and the lulav doesn't matter. Or do we say no, that the second day Yom Tov has like the Rishon has all the din of the first day Yom Tov? That's one thing. And another thing is the Ramban learners we're talking about over here. The first day Yom Tov versus the 7 days of the Beis Hamikdash. Do all the 7 days, because it says have the same din as the first day by us, or do the other 6 days have the same din like by us, which you don't care? Faces and all the time want to know what's going on. Why, when it comes to Hadas, it applies entire Yom Tov, and it comes to Lachem, it doesn't. So some of the Shem want to learn. Faces doesn't like it because it says Lakachtem Lachem b'Yom Rishon. So the Yom Rishon goes on the word Lachem. And then afterwards, it says all the other din. Don't say the Yom Rishon. So everything else applies. It says after Yom Rishon. This is the problem with that because one of the din we learned from the Kachta, the Kicha Tamba, you need to take all 4 minutes, otherwise you're not going to anything. But according to you, the din should be that only the first day and the second day. If you only have a little bit, no how does not have it should still be yaitz. No such thing. So the bottom line is going to tell you is those things which are dinim in the lulav itself, the essig itself, like hodor, that applies to whole yom. Dinim which are sort of extraneous, it shouldn't be stolen, borrowed, and all that thing. That does not apply only the first day and no more. So Gemara says, no. So what about the other days? My law, and yet the Mishnah says it sounds like then you're not allowed to steal a little entire yom tov. Why not? Should have the mitzvah haba ba'aveda. It's a mitzvah haba ba'aveda. You stole a lulav. Remember it says, you brought a carbon. You'll bring a carbon. The Navi is reprimanding them. You bring a carbon that's stolen, a pesach, a hinkadike, a limping carbon, there's a chayil and a sick one. And look what you're comparing. You're comparing a stolen to something that's sick or something that's limping. An animal that's limping, that's an intrinsic problem. Gozel do me the pesach. My pesach less than the counter. You can't remedy a permanent blemish. Av gozel less later counter. There's no solution to gozel. Why not? Loishna leaf. Even if you hold yish alone as kind. Loishna leaf na yish. Of course you're not yaitsim because it's not yours. The loishna la'ach yish. Nor even after yish. L'chayil it's yours now. Now bishleim the yish by a carbon. Odom ki yakiv mikamam rachman. The lab is not yours. La'ach yish. Or can you be you kind of yish? Allah mission have the mitzvah hababa beta. Must be even after yish mitzvah beta. Now, the Ritva learns that the din of mitzvah beta only applies to the Gemara's cases, which is basically a sukkah, a lulav, and sorry, not sukkah, a lulav and carbon.
I was going to ask, is mitzvah haba ba'aveda chiddush again with this lulav, or is it a follow
So
across?
the Ritva that test learned only here because we learned from carbon. And why there? Because any mitzvah, which we're not, it's not just a mitzvah, we're trying to appease the Eibishter. You're appeasing the Eibishter and giving a patch and pun at the same time. You're trying to ask the carbon and then, or by lulav, we learn that the mother you want, you shake it because you want the winds to come and the rain to come. But everywhere else, mitzvah is all right. Everyone holds now. Traces and tests learned that mitzvah is only mitzvah. But first, you have to ask a question. So, what about the first day? So, what do you need a pasuk lochem? It's mitzvah b'aveda. So, when traces and tests learned that mitzvah is only mitzvah, we understand. You need a pasuk to tell you that's awesome hatayda. But or if you hold the mitzvah the rice which traces from Lam Aleph is because he follows that the main limud of Lakach Lechem is loy hashol. Once you say loy hashol, not a borrowed one. And once it's not a borrowed one, you can already throw in stolen one as well. But let's just finish what here about mitzvah b'aveda. Tomorrow we'll get you more on the subject. It is a very interesting analogy. It says, I love justice. I hate gezel. I hate gezel where you steal a carbon. What do you mean? Mashal. Now the whole world is Eibishter. What's the Eibishter if it's the Yankles or by Beryl? Both is amongst the Eibishter. Mashal Mele Basel of a king. Is passing by the houses collecting these taxes. He said to all of the servants, pay your dues. Who is it going to end up the tax? Or with you anyway? Why should we pay? I want everyone else to learn from me that the king has to pay, then everyone pays. So no one should try to avoid paying tax. I'm not going to accept a carbon that's stolen. Even though at the end of the day it ends up with me anyway. My children should learn from me. So mitzvah b'aveda is something frowned upon. We'll talk more about it in mitzvah. Okay, everyone have a good day.